What unfolds when someone dares to intimidate Judge Frank Caprio in his own courtroom? Your Honor, I believe there's been some kind of mistake here. Do you even know who I am? Those words lingered in the air like a gauntlet cast before Providence's most admired judge. Yet what followed would turn an ordinary traffic case into a lesson in humility witnessed by millions. The man standing before Judge Caprio wasn't a random defendant. It was Richard Blackstone, CEO of Blackstone Holdings, a real estate tycoon valued at nearly $800 million, a philanthropist, and one of Rhode Island's most powerful figures. He owned vast stretches of Newport's waterfront, had politicians on direct dial, and hadn't been told no in more than 20 years. But inside courtroom 6A on that Tuesday morning, he was about to realize that wealth doesn't purchase respect, and influence carries no weight before the right judge. The real mistake, sir, is believing that matters in my courtroom. Judge Caprio's reply was steady, deliberate, yet bore the gravity of 3 decades on the bench. The mogul's smug grin began to fade. What he assumed would be a 5-minute formality was destined to become the longest 15 minutes of his privileged life. And no one present knew they were about to witness an event that would redefine their understanding of justice, humility, and the moral force of doing what's right. Subscribe now because you're about to learn why Judge Frank Caprio has earned global admiration, and why this clash became one of the most watched courtroom encounters in internet history. On paper, the case seems straightforward. Richard Blackstone had been clocked at 85 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour school zone on Elmwood Avenue. Not just any zone, but directly in front of Classical High School at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Children were walking home. Crossing guards manned every intersection. The warning signs were unavoidable. When Officer Martinez stopped him, Blackstone's first words weren't remorseful or explanatory. They were threatening. "Do you even know who you're dealing with, officer? I can take your badge." Later, body cam footage revealed Martinez remaining calm and professional as Blackstone grew more hostile. "This is harassment, nothing less. I'll be reporting you to your captain." But Martinez had seen this type countless times. Drivers convinced their fortune placed them above the law. He issued the citation carefully, respectfully, with quiet assurance that everyone, regardless of wealth, must one day stand before Judge Caprio. On the morning of the hearing, Blackstone pulled up to the courthouse in a midnight black Bentley Mulsanne, worth more than many people's homes. His defense team was made up of 3 lawyers from the priciest law firm in the state. He wore a custom Armani suit that cost more than a teacher earns in a month. Every element of his appearance carried one message loud and clear: "I am above this." As Blackstone moved through the courthouse corridors, his phone never stopped buzzing. Business deals, political appointments, charity galas. He was handling multi-million-dollar negotiations while treating his court date like a small annoyance. "This shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, he told his lead counsel. "Once the judge realizes who I am, he'll understand." But his attorney, Victoria Stern, had tried to caution him. "Your Honor, Judge Caprio has a reputation. He's fair, but arrogance doesn't fly in his courtroom. Maybe we should take another approach." Blackstone dismissed her warning with a wave. "Judges are politicians, Victoria. Everyone has a price, everyone has a pressure point." What Blackstone didn't realize was that Judge Caprio had already been paying attention. For weeks, he had been following news about Blackstone Holdings, and what he read disturbed him deeply. Just 2 weeks earlier, the Providence Journal had released a damning investigative series on Blackstone's empire. The reports showed how his company had systematically pushed out dozens of low-income families from affordable apartments, converting them into luxury condos. Elderly tenants who had lived there for decades were given 30 days to leave. Single mothers were thrown into homelessness because Blackstone found it more profitable to rent to wealthy college students. The investigation revealed repeated violations of city ordinances, ignored safety complaints, and intimidation tactics against tenants who dared to organize. One story in particular stuck with Judge Caprio: the case of Mrs. Elena Santos, an 84-year-old widow forced to move in with her daughter after Blackstone tripled her rent overnight. Caprio had read every article. He'd seen photos of families hauling their belongings into pickup trucks, of children crying as they left the only homes they had ever known. But what angered him most was Blackstone's own response to the backlash: "If they can't afford market rates, they should live somewhere else. I'm not running a charity." So when Blackstone's hearing was called that morning, Judge Caprio was prepared. Not for a clash, but for justice. Real justice, the kind that ignores wealth and focuses on human dignity. Case number 47832, the clerk announced. State of Rhode Island versus Richard Blackstone. Excessive speeding in a school zone. Blackstone strolled to the bench with casual confidence. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never truly faced consequences. His lawyers flanked him like armored guards, briefcases stuffed with legal precedents and technical loopholes. Victoria Stern clutched a thick binder filled with glowing character letters from politicians, business leaders and charity executives. Judge Caprio glanced up from the case file, his eyes immediately sizing up the defendant before him. An expensive suit, a practiced posture, and the faint smile of someone expecting special treatment. But what stood out most wasn't the wealth or the arrogance. It was the utter lack of remorse in Blackstone's face. No concern for the children he had put at risk. No recognition that he had done anything wrong. "Mr. Blackstone," Judge Caprio began, "you are charged with driving 85 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone. How do you plead?" "Your Honor," Blackstone answered, his voice polished with just the right blend of respect and expectation. "Before we proceed, I believe there may be some confusion. I'm Richard Blackstone, CEO of Blackstone Holdings. I'm sure you know of my contributions to this community. I think this charge is simply a misunderstanding that we can clear up quickly." The courtroom went still. Even the court reporter froze mid-keystroke. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, studying the man standing before him. 3 decades on the bench had sharpened his ability to read people, and what he read in Blackstone disgusted him. "Mr. Blackstone, I asked how you plead to the charge," the judge said evenly. "Not for a recitation of your resume." But what came next stunned everyone present, including Blackstone's own attorneys. The polished mask slipped. The respectful tone vanished. In its place came the voice of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. "Your Honor, with all due respect, there must be some mistake. Do you know who I am? I've donated millions to this city. I employ hundreds of residents. I think we can come to an arrangement that works for everyone." The silence that followed stretched for 12 long seconds. Judge Caprio counted them. 12 seconds in which the entire courtroom held its breath, waiting for Rhode Island's most respected judge to answer the most brazen attempt at intimidation they had ever seen. When Caprio finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost quiet, but carried the weight of 30 years of delivering justice to both the powerful and the powerless. "The mistake, sir, would be thinking that any of that matters in my courtroom." Blackstone's smug smile faltered. This was not unfolding the way he expected. "Your Honor, perhaps we should discuss this privately," Blackstone tried again. "I'm confident we can find an understanding that best serves the community." "Mr. Blackstone," Judge Caprio replied, his tone now firmer, "you were driving 85 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone, at 2:47 in the afternoon, while children were walking home from school. That is not a mistake. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a decision. A reckless, selfish decision that could have cost a child their life." For the first time since entering the courtroom, Richard Blackstone looked truly stunned. Judges didn't usually scold him. Judges usually listened, nodded at his explanations, accepted his donations, and discreetly made problems vanish. "Your Honor," Blackstone stammered, "I was late for an important meeting, the Pediatric Cancer Foundation Gala Planning Committee. Surely you can appreciate that sometimes—" "I understand," Judge Caprio cut in sharply. "I understand that you believed your meeting mattered more than the safety of children. I understand that you think your time is worth more than their lives. What I do not understand is how anyone can stand in my courtroom and attempt to justify endangering kids." The air in the courtroom shifted. What had started as a routine speeding case was transforming into a moral reckoning. Blackstone's attorneys scribbled frantically, searching for some legal lifeline as their client lost control of the narrative. But Judge Caprio wasn't done. His next words would echo in Richard Blackstone's memory for years. "Mr. Blackstone," the judge continued, "I've been following reports about you. Your business practices. Your treatment of tenants. Your response to the families you forced from their homes." Judge Caprio lifted a folded newspaper clipping from his desk and read aloud. "I believe these were your exact words. If they can't afford market rates, they should find somewhere else to live. I'm not running a charity." Blackstone's face drained of color. This was never supposed to touch his empire. This was supposed to be a routine traffic ticket, a fine, a handshake, and a quiet exit. "Your Honor," he protested weakly, "I fail to see how my business dealings are relevant to a traffic citation." "They are relevant," Judge Caprio answered firmly, "because they reveal exactly who you are. They reveal a man who thinks rules don't apply to him. Speed limits, housing protections, basic human decency. Mere obstacles to someone who believes money makes him untouchable. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now and drop your thoughts in the comments. What should Judge Caprio do next? Your support helps us bring you more unforgettable courtroom showdowns like this one. At that point, Victoria Stern finally spoke up, trying to salvage what remained of the defense. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman and philanthropist. He has contributed millions to charities, created hundreds of jobs, and has been considered a pillar of this community for over 24 years. His personal references surely appealed to Miss Stern. But Judge Caprio interrupted. I don't doubt that your client has donated to charity, he said firmly. What I question is whether that entitles him to put children at risk, push families out, and threaten police officers. At that point, Blackstone's agitation became visible. The calm, collected manner he had worn earlier was gone. This is absurd. I was only going 5 miles over the limit. 50 miles over, Judge Caprio corrected, and in a school zone. That's not simply speeding, Mr. Blackstone. That's reckless endangerment. Listen, Blackstone snapped, his real nature finally breaking through. I don't have time for this sermon. I've got meetings. I've got deals closing. I've got people relying on me. Just tell me the fine so we can all get on with our lives. The courtroom broke into whispers. Even Blackstone's own attorneys looked humiliated. Judge Caprio, however, stayed composed, almost peaceful. This was the moment he had anticipated, when Blackstone's true self would surface beneath the polished suits and public generosity. Mr. Blackstone, the judge said evenly, you just told me that justice doesn't fit into your schedule, that your meetings outweigh responsibility, and that protecting children is less important than your profits. Is that really what you want officially recorded? For the first time since walking in, Richard Blackstone grasped that he was in genuine trouble. The judge wasn't swayed by wealth, wasn't impressed by contacts, and couldn't be bought with donations or influence. This was going to be decided by the law. What followed would spread to millions online, shared across platforms, transforming Judge Frank Caprio into a global icon of fairness and principle. Your Honor, Blackstone faltered, I believe I may have spoken poorly. Of course, I take this matter seriously. Very seriously. I would never deliberately put anyone, especially children, in danger. But you did put them in danger, Judge Caprio answered calmly. The real issue is what we do about it now. The highest penalty for this offense is $500 and a 30-day suspension of your license. Given your attitude and your clear belief that the law doesn't apply to you, I'm leaning toward giving the maximum sentence. Blackstone's lawyer quickly stood. Your Honor, perhaps we can consider an alternative sentence. Mr. Blackstone was prepared to offer a generous donation to the court's Victim Aid Fund or perhaps to a local children's charity. He was also willing to arrange community service at any site the court might choose. Judge Caprio lifted his hand to silence the room. Miss Stern, your client just told me he has no time for community service because he's too busy with meetings. But here's what I'm going to do. The chamber went completely quiet. Even the court reporter froze, fearful of missing a single word of what was about to follow. Mr. Blackstone, the judge said, I'm sentencing you to 30 days of community service. But not at a charity gala where you can mingle with wealthy donors. You will spend those 30 days working at the homeless shelter on Broad Street, the same shelter currently housing the families you forced out of your properties. Blackstone's jaw dropped. Your Honor, that's utterly inappropriate. I can't possibly. You will report to Director Sarah Williams every Saturday and Sunday for the next 15 weeks, 8 hours each day, Judge Caprio continued. You'll serve food, scrub bathrooms, and listen to the stories of the very people you displaced. And when those 30 days are complete, you'll deliver a letter to me explaining what you've learned about the true cost of your business practices. The businessman's complexion shifted from pale to red to deep purple. This is outrageous. You can't force me, I can and I am. Judge Caprio cut in, his tone firm. And if you miss even a single day of service, or if I hear you've treated the residents or staff with anything less than full respect, I'll hold you in contempt and sentence you to 30 days in jail instead. Attorney Victoria Stern scribbled furiously, already mapping out the appeal. Your Honor, we'll need time to review this order. It's highly irregular and perhaps beyond the court's authority. Miss Stern, the judge replied evenly, your client has two choices. He accepts this sentence or he spends 30 days in the ACI medium security prison while you file appeals. Which will it be? But the most shocking moment had not yet arrived, and it would leave everyone present questioning everything they thought they knew about justice and redemption. Blackstone remained speechless for nearly a full minute, his mind racing. He could fight this, of course. His lawyers could appeal, allege judicial overreach, even take the case to the state Supreme Court if necessary. He had both the money and the influence to make Judge Caprio's life very difficult. Yet something in the judge's expression held him back. It wasn't fury or vengeance. It was disappointment. The kind of disappointment a father feels toward a son who has lost his way, has failed to reach his true potential. And for reasons Blackstone couldn't fully explain, that disappointment struck deeper than any fine or sentence ever could. "I'll do the community service," he whispered. Judge Caprio gave a small nod. "Good. But there's one more requirement. Every family you evicted over the last year, you will personally call them and apologize. Not through lawyers. Not through assistants. You directly." "Your Honor," Victoria Stern objected sharply, "that would force my client to admit liability in ongoing civil cases. We absolutely cannot agree to that." "Then he can serve jail time instead," Judge Caprio answered calmly. Blackstone glanced at his attorney, then back at the bench. "I'll make the calls." In front of witnesses, the judge clarified. "Social workers from the Housing Authority will sit in on each call to confirm the apologies are sincere and complete." With that, Judge Caprio was creating a record that left no room for Blackstone to slip away from his commitments later. The real estate magnate gave a slow nod. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Blackstone, I need you to understand something. This isn't about punishment, it's about education. You've spent years surrounded by people who only say yes, who validate every move you make, who profit from your wealth. In that echo chamber, you've forgotten what it means to answer to anyone but yourself." For the first time since stepping into the courtroom, Blackstone actually seemed to hear him. "Your Honor, I honestly never thought about it that way." "I know you didn't," Caprio replied. "That's exactly the issue. When you drive 85 miles an hour past a school, you're not thinking about the children. When you triple someone's rent, you're not thinking about the families. You're focused on yourself, your schedule, your profits. But every decision carries consequences. And starting today, you're going to begin learning what those consequences truly look like." Share this video with someone who needs to see what accountability really means. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful moments of justice. As Blackstone gathered himself to leave the courtroom, something unexpected unfolded. Mrs. Zelina Santos, the 84-year-old widow who had once been forced out of her apartment, was seated quietly in the gallery. She had originally come to observe other cases but remained when she heard Blackstone's name. Judge Caprio's eyes found her. "Mrs. Santos, would you care to say anything to Mr. Blackstone?" The elderly woman rose slowly, her arthritic joints making each step difficult. Blackstone turned toward her. He turned to face her, and for the first time he saw one of his eviction notices take human form. She wasn't a document, she wasn't a file, she wasn't a line on a balance sheet. She was a person. A woman whose life he had disrupted without hesitation. "Mr. Blackstone," she said in her thickly accented English, "I lived in your building for 28 years. I raised my children there. My husband died there. When you forced me out, I lost more than just four walls. I lost my community, my neighbors, my memories. But I want you to understand this. I forgive you. Because carrying anger in my heart hurts me more than it ever could hurt you." The silence that followed filled the entire courtroom. Blackstone stood frozen, staring at this small, dignified woman who had just shown him more grace in a few sentences than he had known in 63 years of life. "Mrs. Santos," he whispered, "I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." She gave a single nod, then lowered herself back into her seat. Judge Caprio watched the moment with quiet satisfaction. This was the reason he had become a judge. Not merely to hand down punishment, but to create moments of recognition, moments where people remembered each other's humanity. "Mr. Blackstone," he said, "your community service begins this Saturday at 8 a.m. Don't be late. And one more thing, when you serve meals at the shelter, I want you to look every person in the eye. Learn their names. Listen to their stories. Never forget that every business decision you make touches real lives." Blackstone walked toward the exit, his legal team following close behind. But just before stepping through the door, he turned, looked back at Mrs. Santos and mouthed the words, "Thank you." 6 months later, Richard Blackstone would go on to establish a $50 million affordable housing trust. He would personally guarantee that no tenant in his buildings would ever again be removed without at least 6 months' notice and relocation assistance. And even after his mandatory service ended, every Saturday and Sunday, he could be found at the Broad Street shelter, handing out meals and listening to stories. But on that morning in courtroom 6A, all anyone knew was that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment when justice was not about punishment, but about transformation. A moment that reminded everyone that even the most powerful can learn, can grow, and can change, if they are willing to open their hearts to the humanity they once ignored.